I think the thing about the time that we're in now is that we are, I won't say we're in a crisis yet, we're certainly in fiscally challenged times. And it's different than it's been in the past. We have a deficit that is out there looming. We have the prospect of budget cuts that we have not seen before, both to discretionary spending and mandatory spending, and to many programs that support the citizens of the United States and that are critical to the citizens of the United States. So we need to start looking at those programs and looking at what surrounds those programs, the support functions, how the programs are delivered, redundancy across the government and programs, to see how we can make things more efficient while still delivering the same quality services to the public and as many services as we can provide. So I would suggest that during tough times is when you have these opportunities to make these big, to think differently and to act boldly. And I would counsel all of my colleagues in the federal government to do that, to exercise leadership and to say now's the time we can really sit back and say, what have we been doing, how have we been doing it, and how can we change things for the better? Not just in our own agency, but across agencies that work on similar types of things. So I would suggest to them that they start looking at that now. I think one of the biggest problems the federal government has had across the board is getting the data they need to support their mission and their operations. There's lots of data there, but it has been collected for very specific purposes. It is frequently in disparate systems. It is in legacy systems that are not easy to access. There aren't really standards across the board to help with data access. And I think now more than ever, the people in the programs who are trying to do service delivery and figure out how to do that, the people at the higher levels who are looking across the government and trying to figure out how can we do things across the government more efficiently and effectively are challenged because they don't have the data to support that kind of inequality. Data is the building block of information. If you have data, you can array it in a variety of different ways to create information. I think there's a government-wide approach that we need to start looking at, and I think people are looking at. And then there is approach that you can start taking now in your agency. First of all, in your agency, we'll just start there. People are very familiar in their agency with their programs. They're very familiar with their back office operations. They know their systems. They've certainly inventoried their systems. They certainly understand what the systems are doing within the program. Many of these systems, even though they're old, support the programs and they support them well, but they're just not modern systems and they don't necessarily have all the data they need to support informed decision making or analysis going forward. And they're not easy to share data with. So I would suggest to my colleagues in the federal government that they in fact go out there now and start looking at the data in these systems and what's out there and what can be extracted and where they could put this data to enable the beginnings of analytics. And I would suggest that the best way to do that now is we have enabling technology known as the cloud that allows you to quickly stand up an environment where you can put data, have it stored or taken offline, and just put online when you need it and taken off when you don't, just pay go kind of experience. That would be a wonderful place to start for data analysis. I think the long term, we really need to look at a framework across government. And what gives me great encouragement is that we have a wonderful example of how this was done with the Recovery Act. I really think that the government was pressed to do something quickly, which they did, and very successfully. One might argue about the metrics that came out of it for job creation and a variety of other things. That's one thing. But you don't see a lot of argument going on about the spending data that came out of there. So I think we have a framework that we can build on now to do one critical thing that I think is a primary role of the federal government, which is data collection. I think it is incumbent upon the government to collect the data from the citizens or from the people or from the agencies and make sure that that data is timely, accurate, and reliable, and to put it in a place where not only can the government use it to create information for its program managers and others, but can provide that data out to other stakeholders who can then use it to create information for groups that the government cannot serve, or for for groups that want to do different kinds of analytics to even challenge the federal government and say, are you really delivering what you say you're delivering? I think there's a role for both. Certainly a role for the private sector in doing that, and certainly a role for the government in the collecting of the data and providing certain core information that is inherently governmental information that the citizens were expected to provide. So I think the idea of groups coming together and saying, all right, let's sit down and really discuss this and set up a framework for the federal government, there's an opportunity now. You don't often get these opportunities, and I think we need to seize on it and use this time wisely.